You're listening to episode 957 of the Father Bills Podcast. Welcome back. This episode is entitled The Match of Christmas, given on the Solemnity of the Nativity of the Lord 2024.
Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you all were able, most of you, to get a seat. At our 4 o'clock Mass yesterday, we had some 1,300 people, and they were parked all over the place, and they were all over the place. It was wonderful. What a joyous occasion it was. But it's not always joyous for many people during the season. For today, some days, and for some people, they are walking in darkness. A darkness of loneliness, of grief, anxiety, or lack of hope. For some, Christmas has been overshadowed by a health emergency. For others, it's marked by anything but peace and joy at home. Perhaps an addiction has taken hold, leaving no rescue in sight. But it's into this darkness that God sends his light. As Isaiah's prophecy reminds us, the people who walked in the darkness have seen a great light. Christmas is God's response to the sufferings in our world. In sending his son Jesus, God struck the match, if you will, that would set the world ablaze with hope, joy, and salvation. Now, I want to offer you an image of a match. I have a rather large match, but most matches aren't this big, but for the sake of the homily, you need to see this. But normally they're really small. A matchstick is probably a fraction of this size, and it's insignificant. And in the dark, you wouldn't see anything. But see, when it is struck, it comes alive, bursting into light and dispelling the darkness. A match doesn't give light without friction, though. We need friction. So like this matchbox has a strike side, and I could light it. It needs this resistance as a rough surface to spark a flame. This image parallels Christ's journey. Born in humble roughness of a stable, simple and unnoticed, his life was imbued with hidden power. As he grew and began his ministry, he faced the friction of a world that would resist him, ultimately leading to his crucifixion. Yet through his suffering and death, what seemed like his extinguishing became the catalyst for his resurrection, conquering sin and death, those terrible darknesses we fear, with the brilliance, though, of his glorious light. Like a match, Jesus gave himself away, sacrificing everything to bring light to the world. But his sacrifice didn't end in death, for through that death came resurrection, and his light continues to shine eternally. See, its purpose is to share this light, to light a candle and illuminate it further. And that's what we have here in our Christ candle, in our wreath here. So here's a metaphor for us to deepen our sense of faith within the context of our community. A match isn't meant to burn alone. It just doesn't burn and extinguish. It has a purpose. And that purpose is to share light. Taking bread, if you will, light the other candles. To light candles. To spread illumination. You see, in this metaphor, as Catholics, as Christians, we are the candles that Christ desires to light. And we receive this flame of Christ in our baptism and confirmation. And when we come to Mass, it's renewed in the Eucharist so that we can carry out our mission to take his light into the world. Thank you, Deacon. This Christmas, ask yourself, where can I bring Christ's light? Maybe it's to a family member who's hurting. Maybe a neighbor who feels forgotten. Or someone in need of kindness. Maybe somebody in the hospital or homebound. Maybe your light will be shared through the gifts that you have given or will receive. Maybe it's through a conversation at the dinner table, or watching a football game, or watching a movie together. Like a matchstick, like a match, we may feel some friction because sometimes people will resist it. But do not let that deter you. You never know what the flames of faith will be that you ignite. In our world often shrouded by darkness, remember that the incarnation of Christ was like that match that changed everything. And despite our own struggles, God can quietly strike a spark in our hearts that ignites hope and light, especially when we're unexpecting it, but definitely need it. So here's your homework for the holiday season. Strengthened by Jesus in the Eucharist at this Mass today, let us not only receive the light of Christ through the Eucharist and through the word broken, but be bearers of that light wherever we go. So set out from this church today like a match, and be that person through whom God can strike a spark that will ignite hope and light in the darkness.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Father Bales podcast. Now, you may or may not have caught this, but there was an episode before this that I published just before the Christmas one, this one I just published, and it was the fourth week of Advent. Of course, that was a Sunday, and Christmas was like 2 days later, so that's why they're kind of stacked up on each other, and I produced them in the same sitting on this, I guess, Christmas day that I'm producing this now. So if you want to get that, make sure you look back on the podcast list. You can just go to my website as well and check it out there. You can also, at that website, email me if you have any questions or comments. In the meantime, may God bless you and have a great set of holy days. Bye-bye.